Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Between Sundays, the podcast for parents of kids birth through fifth grade who want to grow their kids' faith at home. My name is Makenna Ardis, and I am your host. Today, we are wrapping up our Biblical Fatherhood series. Today, we're specifically talking about how to respond when we mess up. I'm joined again by our kids pastor at our Frisco East campus, Pastor Grimm. Ian, how are you doing?
Doing good. Glad to be back.
Good. Hey, I know last week you told everybody a little bit about you, but just briefly, can you tell us about your kids and your wife one more time?
Yeah, Jess is my wife. Been married almost 20 years, which
She's a babe.
this weekend. She's, glad you said it, so I don't know. She also works here at the church doing event staff stuff. She loves that. Grady is just graduated high school, getting ready to go to Wichita State. Addie is going to be a junior theater girl, wants to be a teacher, special needs teacher. And so she's pretty excited about that. Sammy is 9, and he's already a genius, I think, and maybe an evil genius. We'll see. We'll see how that's an
evil genius. It could go one way or the other.
We're at a tipping point, I think. So.
Everything that happens today will decide as
yeah, exactly.
Just kidding, Today we're talking about the dad that you're becoming, how to respond when we mess up. And I think one of the hardest things, I've never been a dad before, obviously.
Wow.
But yeah, I know, shocker. But I think one of the hardest things about being a dad is realizing that you don't ever arrive.
Right, yeah.
You're constantly growing, constantly learning, and honestly, constantly messing up.
Yep.
And as a mom, I can say that I do the same thing.
Right.
Shocker. So what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, taking a step back and taking a deep breath, because that feels like a big statement. We never arrive, right? The truth is, as a human being, we don't, right? If we're doing it right and correctly, we're always growing. We're always pursuing and trying to become the best of who God has called us to be, right? And so that should translate into us as dads, and continue to grow as dads, and continue to try to take steps forward and become better at what we're doing, and not just relying on what we know and what we've experienced in the past, but also pushing ourselves forward to be more and to be the best version we can be of a dad for our parent or for our kids as we raise them. So
yeah, I think something cool too is that I've been talking with your wife, and a few weeks ago she actually came to me and has a lot of passion about this topic too. I think we'll do an episode together in the future too about sometimes we think our mistakes or our worst moments, or even how our kids are in elementary school, that's just kind of it. Like the type of parent we are, our best moments, our worst, all of it is like we've almost like capped our growth. But you guys, like you said, have a graduated senior, and he's headed off to college, and you are getting to see firsthand that this is really not the end of your parenting. Right. It's the beginning of it. Yeah. And so these moments that we wonder, have we totally royally screwed our kids up because I lost my temper and totally freaked out on them? This is not the end. This is one step. And the outcome is really never final until, we take our last breath, honestly. And our parenting's never done until that moment too. So I think every dad has those moments though that they wish they could redo. The short temper, the distraction, the words that came out wrong, the missed moment. And in those moments, I know for me, it can be really easy to either shut down or just try to pretend it never happened. Sure. So what would you say is the healthiest way or a healthier way to respond when we mess up with our kids?
Yeah, I unfortunately have gotten to just live this out, having, like I said, a kid who's going to college, but then he has a little brother who's 9. Mm-hmm. And I am constantly apologizing to Grady because I'm like, I'm so sorry for how crappy a dad I was when you were his age, right? Because I would have parented you differently had I had the experience and the wisdom and been through what we're going through. That's why I think at times we feel like younger kids get away with more. It's because, we learned with our older kids that these things don't necessarily always work the way we want it to.
Yeah.
And then we learn patience, we learn grace. Those are things that we learn, right? It's not something that's natural for us. Like we learn patience, we learn grace, we learn forgiveness, we learn mercy because it's modeled for us, right?
Yeah.
And we want to model that for our kids. And especially when we mess up. I remember like the moment I always go back to in my mind for Grady. It was a devastating moment for me where it's just me and him at home. He's like 2. I think Addie may have been at home. I don't remember if she was somewhere because she was like 6 months old. But Jess, my wife, was in the hospital. She'd been in the hospital for like 3 weeks. We were getting ready to move. Grady would not go to bed. He would not go to bed. I'd been up for hours, and just not out of love, not out of wanting to teach him, but literally out of exhaustion and frustration, I spanked him, and then just felt horrible. I'm like, I'm spanking this kid whose mom isn't here. He doesn't know what's going on. He's devastated. But then I'm like, I'm 22, 23 years old. I don't know what's going on. I'm frustrated. I'm exhausted. And it was in that moment, you know, looking back at that, I see that, and I am just so thankful for the mercy that God has shown me as a dad, that he didn't take that moment, the worst moment I had as a parent, and allow that to become my identity as a parent, right? God forgave me for my frustration, right? And then when I was old, when Grady was old enough, I talked to him about it. He doesn't even remember. He has no idea. But
isn't that like our worst fear in those
so
moments
crazy.
too? Like,
oh,
this is going to be his first memory.
This kid, and he's 2
He's going to hate me. Yeah.
But we talked about it once, and I said, I just want to say I'm sorry. Right. You had no idea then, you know, you weren't old enough to really process or understand, but I'm sorry that this happened. Right. And it's a difficult thing to go through. It's a difficult thing to humble yourself, right? To trust in their forgiveness, as you know, because they're your kid, right? Like you're like, I'm entrusting myself to your forgiveness and your mercy now. But I think that helped soften me to help know that I need to model that for them, because there are times where Grady's going to need to be able to ask his kids for forgiveness and say, I messed up, and say, I didn't get this right. I acted out of anger or frustration in a way that brought hurt and pain, right? I think the beautiful thing about God is that our God is, and always has been, a God of restoration. God wants to bring us back, not only to him, but to each other. And in every moment, he pours out his love and his mercy on us to bring us back together. It's our job to simply accept it and trust him, right? That he's going to do that. And so like going through that and just, okay, how do I do this better? And there's been 100, maybe thousands of other moments with all of our kids where we're like, wow, okay, light bulb moment. Just grew as a parent, just took 1,000 steps forward, but I need to apologize for all of the times that I messed this up because I didn't understand, right? And we have conversations with our kids, and we help mature them and grow them by maturing and growing ourselves, and letting them see that and be a part of that process, and not trying to wall them off from it or hide our mess ups or things like that. Because it's too easy to do that, right? Shame, which comes, we get shame when we mess up, when we sin. Shame tries to separate us from those we love. Shame wants us to put up walls. Shame wants us to separate us from our spouse and our kids and even our God, to say, look at what you did. It's so horrible, they'll never forgive you. That's shame, right? And the love of God shines a bright light on that and says, this is not true. This is a lie. And you can recognize it as that and move on from it. So
something we talked about in our episode with Lance a couple episodes ago too.
Lance
is sometimes vulnerability costs you with your kids. And we're in today's day and age, we're raising kids in a way that we were not raised, you know, and the evolution of the modern parent and the modern dad and the modern mom looks so different in this generation as it did even just one generation ago.
Sure.
Like the way, I mean, even the way you were saying, I'm sure part of it is a lot of the way you raised Grady being different from the way you're raising Sammy has to do with your experience. But there's how many years are between them as well? 9 years?
8 or 9 years, yeah.
Yeah, so there's still a good difference, I mean, in the way, the technology that was available even, or the research that was available when you raised Grady. We're raising kids differently now than our parents raised us, and we're living out a parenting style that was not modeled for us. So I don't know what it was like for you, but I know I was raised in a house where parents don't say sorry. Like,
Yeah.
What we did is the right thing. Like,
Sure.
as mom and dad, we are right, you are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, no shame to them for that. That's the way they were raised, you know.
Right.
But we're doing something different. We're breaking these cycles, and in order to do that, we have to be vulnerable with our kids. I think we have this mindset. I don't know that it's rooted in pride. I think maybe it's just in the way that it always was. We're telling our kids to trust us, that we know what's best for them, and then we mess up. And I think sometimes we have the tendency to think that that breaks their trust. But I think what we're doing is we're trying to build that trust. I would never want to follow somebody that couldn't admit that they were wrong.
Yeah.
So when
saying you're sorry only builds trust. It doesn't destroy trust.
Right. Like, it restores it. And so much of the work that we do in relationships is done in the repair, the best work, the best parenting that we're going to do. It's a lie to say it's doesn't happen in the mistakes, that our worst moments happen in the mistakes. I think actually our best moments in parenting happen because of the repair that we allow. So when I think about failure and restoration, when we were talking about this episode, we talked about Peter. What comes to mind for you?
I love Peter, his story. I love the example of restoration we see in Peter. I love the example of humility, right? Because Peter's like, I've got to get it all right, you know? And he's like, I'm going to get it all right. And then he messes up. But then God meets him in that mess up and brings restoration. And we'll talk a little bit more about it here in a minute. But then we also see how that doesn't just stay in that moment for Peter, that we see Peter's humility is honestly what allows the church to grow and thrive with him as the leader. He's humble and he recognizes when he messes up. Even when when Paul comes and says, hey, like, you're telling the people to do this, you know it's wrong. Like, Paul's like a 22-year-old, like, young dude, and Peter's the rock of the church, right? Like, was walked with Jesus, and Peter's response is, you are right. And he wasn't in that moment, even as the leader, he humbled himself and said, you're right. And I think that comes from this story that we're going to talk about where Peter denies Jesus, right? Where Peter's like, hey, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be the one. I'm going to be the one that's going to be with you. And then of course, if you don't know the story, Jesus tells Peter at the Last Supper in the upper room that before basically daybreak, you're going to deny me 3 times while I'm on the cross, right? And Peter says, absolutely not. Never, 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 never. Well, we know from reading the story, scripture, that 3 times Peter denies Christ, right? They're like, weren't you with Jesus? He's like, no, I don't know that guy. I don't know that guy, right? And so we just see this epic failure in the life of Peter. It's a horrible moment. I mean, just imagine, put yourself in that situation.
Right. You
just denied your Savior, the guy that you said is your king, that you've walked with for 3 years.
Yeah.
That's devastating, right? That's horrible. All of the brokenness and the sinfulness that is in Peter's life leads up to this moment of denial, right? But what's so amazing about that story is that God doesn't leave him there. Jesus comes back and brings him back to restoration, right? We see the story when Jesus and Peter are talking on the lakeside, and there's a lot of elements to this story that show us what the story is about, but there's this particular kind of fire that Jesus sets and sets his fire up to remind Peter of the moment when he denied Jesus. And he comes to him, he says, Peter, do you love me? Right? Peter says, obviously, right? You know I do. And then he's asked him again, Peter, do you love me? Then 3 times he asked Peter, do you love me? Right? And we see this incredible picture of Peter denying Jesus 3 times. And then Jesus allowing, not forcing it, not saying, not making the decision for him, but offering to him, Peter, do you love me? And 3 times Peter says, absolutely, you know I do, right? And then it's in that moment that Jesus declares, like, this humility, this restoration, this growth is what we will build this kingdom on, right? And then that carries out, like, Peter lives that out for the rest of his days. Like, when you read his letters in First, like, there's some of the most powerful letters that you can read, because it's literally just about like who we're supposed to be, right? What, like it's just incredible. Like that somebody who was there, who had such a devastating fall, was restored in such a powerful way.
Yeah.
And this is an incredible picture, right? And I think as dads, we're going to mess up. We're going to be Peter probably more than 3 times, denying whatever, right? We're going to mess up. We're going to act out in anger. We're going to act out in rage. We're going to say the wrong things. We're going to let our kids down, right? We're going to make mistakes. But God always meets us in those mistakes and then draws us back to him. One thing I always tell, so I lead a 10th grade small group of boys, and I always tell them, I said, it does not matter how far you've strayed from the plan that God has for your life. The only step you have to take is one step back towards him.
That's right.
And then when you take that one step back towards him, God is there with you. And then the next step is easier. And then the next step is easier because now you're walking with him, not against him, right? It's one step, right? And as dads, I think we got to be willing and brave enough to take that one step. And if we'll take that one step back towards restoration, I think we'll feel how much easier it gets from there, because now God is walking with us through that.
Yeah, I think too what's cool about the story of Peter is that God doesn't use Peter in spite of his denial. He uses his denial.
He uses the denial. He uses the
denial to bring him back to himself. And man, wow. Sorry, that just stood out to me for a second. I was like, whoa, that's good. Okay. So I think one of the most natural reactions that I've seen a lot of dads go to is they go quiet after a mess up. I mean, we talk about this weight of this spiritual leadership. It's heavy. Sure. And when you mess up, you feel like you've let your family down. You've let, the people that we're counting on, you've let yourself down. Sometimes I can imagine you feel like you've let God down in it. And sometimes we just end up pulling back. We say less, or oftentimes we go on the opposite end and we overcorrect and maybe we snap at things that we shouldn't and nitpick the things that maybe don't matter as much, or we just avoid it altogether. But that doesn't really lead to healing in a home. So what would you say to the dad who feels like when they mess up, they shut down and shut off?
I think it's important to remember that your kids are watching you. They're watching how you respond, and not to put more pressure on a dad or a parent, because that's not what this is about. But they're learning from how you respond, right? And it's okay. It's okay to take a step back. It's okay to go internal if you need to, and process and think. Like if you need your time, that's fine. But you have to come back forward and initiate that conversation. One thing I always tell people is like, listen, your relationship with your kids is your responsibility. It's not your kids' responsibility. The goodness of the relationship with your kids is your responsibility as a parent. You cannot put that on them, right? So when there's something that has to be said, you're the one who needs to say it. If there's a bridge that has to be built, you need to be the one to build it as the parent, because that's not their responsibility, right? No matter how old they are, right? That's how that relationship works.
That's the gift from God.
That's the gift. That's the dynamic of that relationship, right? But when we emotionally withdraw, and I'm guilty of this. This is how I'll shut down. I'm like, ugh, I don't want to talk about it. I'm just go watch the game or whatever, right? We're teaching our kids that like a lot of things. We're teaching a lot of things, but that distance is more important than like safe communication, right? That like when dad needs his time, he doesn't want us to talk to him, right? And you don't want that to be the response of your kids, right? When your kids are going through something, you want them to do what? You want them to come to you and be open about it, right? And ask for help. You have to model that as a parent. You have to model that as a dad, right? Most of the times, kids interpret silence as rejection. That doesn't mean that that's what's happening, but we have to be aware that that's their interpretation. That's how they're approaching.
They've got a limited understanding,
And then I think you said it earlier that it's the growth happens in the restoration, right? In those moments, presence after failure is what rebuilds trust. Trust is broken, yes, when there's failure, But it's just like when you exercise, when you work out, when you're lifting weights, you're destroying that muscle, you're breaking it down, and then it heals, it comes back stronger. Now you have to do things to make it, you got to do the right protein and eat right and rest and drink water, all that stuff. It's the same thing when we mess up, right? Like that trust is broken. But if we are intentional about bringing restoration and asking for forgiveness and then regrowing it, that trust comes back stronger than it was before, right? It doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean it doesn't take work. It doesn't mean you're not sore afterwards, you know what I mean? And all that, but it's worth doing. That work is worth doing as a parent, as a dad, right? You want to model that for your kids.
As we're wrapping up this episode, I was just thinking, there's probably, I can imagine there's a dad listening to this and thinking, yeah, I want to do something different than the way I was raised. I want to parent different. I want to be a better dad. I want to do things differently. One, what would you say to that dad who wants to bridge that gap?
I think just what I said earlier, like the first step is yours, right? Like we talked about last week, it's about orienting yourself towards God. Taking that step and then trusting that God's going to be there with you. It's not an easy first step. It's not an easy thing to do. But listen, like it's difficult. Like it's exhausting to think that we're never done, but it's also gives me such hope to know I'm not a finished product.
This isn't it. Yeah.
This isn't it. This is Ian version 4.0 or whatever, you know what I mean? And like it's gonna get better because I'm gonna trust that God's gonna help me get better, right? You can do that too, right? It doesn't matter where you are in that journey. It doesn't matter if you're been a dad for 50 years or you're a brand new dad or whatever, right? You can always be better. You can always get better by orienting yourself towards God and say, hey, God, what do you want from me in this? Where am I going from this, right? And then just remember that your actions matter more than your words. Your kids are learning from your example. Now, that example may be the way you speak to them. That example may be the way you communicate, but it's less about the words you say and more about what they see in your life, right? Live it out for them.
Yeah, I think I'd love to invite all of the dads and parents watching, if you are in need of starting over, taking that first step towards something new. Maybe you're interested in giving up some old habits. We have a program here at Hope Fellowship called Regeneration. They meet every Monday night at the Frisco East campus at 6:30. It's an incredible program. If you are looking for how to respond when you mess up, hey, there are some big hurts and hangups that we all face in life, and Regeneration is the perfect place to address those. So I'd love to invite anybody listening to join us for that. You don't have to sign up, just show up. 6:30 p.m. Kids ministry is provided. Ian, thank you so much for coming. This was, of course. This was a fun series. I really enjoyed it. If you enjoyed this series and you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend. Share it with a dad who needs encouragement. Maybe share it with a dad who is stuck in the same place that you've been stuck in, wanting to kill old habits and needing a place to start over. So thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week with following up with your kids from VBS at home. Remember, faith is caught before it's taught between Sundays. We'll see you next week.